Houston Gateway to be working in association with the Greater Houston Partnership, who we've had in the last 2 days. Day one, they gave a market update on Houston. Yesterday, we focused on energy transition and subsea. And today we're focusing on aerospace. So I'll shortly be introducing the Greater Houston Partnership contribution section for aerospace. And thanks also to our other in association partner, Andy Grieve with GTech Innovation Centre and HAMCO. So welcome everyone that's just joining us. Come in, make yourself comfortable. And we're just still letting in people just now. So thank you for joining us for day 3 of the 9th annual Aberdeen Houston Gateway and the first ever dedicated section to aerospace. Lots of great speakers from both sides of the pond today, from Scotland, UK, and also from Houston and Texas. So that's it. So I think that's us letting the first set of people. So I think we should kick off, Stacey. So good morning and good welcome. And what I'd like to do is get straight on to introducing, I'm Brett Jackson, by the way, for those of you who haven't already met me. I think most of you have over the last few days. So Stacey, we can hop on from my slide and to the speakers for today. So just a quick overview. We will start off with David Alexander of the Rice Space Institute. He's part of the Greater Houston Partnership in a chair role, but also with the Rice Space Institute. And he will be part of Josh's section, who's the Senior Director of Aerospace at the Greater Houston Partnership. Josh has kindly brought along 2 fantastic guest speakers, Carol from Oceaneering and Diane from Trumbull Unmanned. We'll then hear from George Abbey Jr., Strategic Space Services. We'll hear from then Scotland, and we'll hear from Gordon and Stephen in Insight Group. We'll hear from Colin Black of NASA in Aberdeen and a couple of other companies, which I'll introduce shortly. And we'll finish up with a unique project that encapsulates everything of the last 3 days in conflict, energy, aerospace, transition, tourism, and much more. So David O'Neill will be supported by Travis in bringing us Falls of the Clyde project. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Josh Davis to set the scene for the Greater Houston Partnership Aerospace focus. And Josh will then introduce his 3 guests today, David Alexander, Carol Waltz, and Diane Gibbons. So Josh, the floor is yours, sir.
Brett, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's going to be an absolute treat today. The partnership in Houston, being a part of this Houston Aberdeen Gateway, has really become an institution between the 2 cities and 2 regions. And I think we have an absolute treat for everyone today. Dr. David Alexander is the chair of the Greater Houston Partnership Aerospace and Aviation Committee. And he's also the director of Rice Space Institute, someone who has such a breadth and depth of knowledge, both in the space industry and also how that applies to business. Carl Waltz, we have a great presentation over subsea, space, aerospace, and the synergies that Houston represents. And I think Oceaneering is really the quintessential company demonstrating the synergies within the Houston region. Diane Gibbons, Trumbull Unmanned, she was with us at the Paris Air Show in 2019. Absolutely amazing story with the UAV company out of the Houston spaceport. And all of these companies have a commonality of the synergies that Houston represents between energy, space, and our location within many industries in the Gulf Coast. So that even goes to the Gulf and deep sea side, which is the energy legacy of Houston. So with that, we have a lot of great presentations, and I think I'll turn it over back to you, Brett, and to Dr. David Alexander to kick us off.
Okay, so without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce David Alexander of the Rice Space Institute and also the chair of the Greater Houston Partnership Aerospace Committee. David, the floor is yours, sir.
Great. Well, thank you, Brett. And it's a great honor actually to be invited to this, and it's great to see Aberdeen reach out and into the space area, because I think there's already really strong connections to Houston, and this is just another way of strengthening the connections between Houston and Aberdeen, and particularly I think what I've been pushing for a long time is Houston and Scotland overall. Because this is yesterday was all about energy transition, and I'd like to sort of expand that transition a little bit. And so because this is sort of maybe a new area for some of the folks on the line and Aberdeen in general, what I wanted to do was focus more on an overview. And we're going to hear some very specific examples of how this works from both Carol and Diane. Josh will tell you a little bit more about what's happening in Houston. And then, of course, I'm really excited to hear about what's going on in Scotland and some of the great examples that you have lined up later. So again, this is just going to be a little bit of overview. I'll talk a little bit about technology, but I also want to talk about spaceports, because that's a big conversation in Scotland right now. So Stacey, if we can have the next slide. So just a little bit about the Institute. I don't want to take too long on this. I think we want to get to the specific examples. So Rice University is one of the top universities in the country and in the world. Actually, it's a small private university. We're based in Houston, which means that we've been connected to the human spaceflight program essentially since its inception. The speech that President Kennedy gave that committed the US to going to the moon was given at the Rice football stadium, which actually is American football, not real football. But we've been connected to space activities since the get-go. And so what we do at the Institute is try to create opportunities for our faculty and students to do research, to translate some of the research that they do in materials and nanotechnology and medical technologies and so on, and maybe look for space applications. And I think that's something that's really important to me, and I think it's part of today's conversation. The other thing too is we have educational outreach, but one of the things we've been focusing on is the international connection. So that's why I was particularly pleased to be invited to speak today. So next slide, please, Stacey. So the basic theme here is I gave a talk to Scotsoft about a year ago to it was a digital conference, and I tried to tell everyone that they were all a space company, whether they knew it or not. And the reason for that is, and this is particularly true up in Aberdeen, this idea of remote exploration and the technologies that we need to perform these operations is something that we have in common between space, subsea, and so on. And so you can list a whole range. I always put 3 dots because people have their own ideas of what these technologies might be. But there's just a huge list of areas that we're all working in that, if we had the right conversations, could translate over. Obvious ones are things like robotics, but we also have this human-robot interface technologies that we have to think about, and so on. And I'll emphasize some of these things a little bit later, along with a kind of broader view that I'm trying to promote and take. For those of you who are maybe not familiar with NASA speak, this sustainability is very important. ISRU is essentially in-space resource utilization, which is NASA speak for don't take it if you don't have to. In other words, how do we use what's available to us wherever we happen to be, whether it be sunlight for powering your spacecraft, or whether it be using lunar regolith to create landing platforms and roadways and so on for robots on the moon, how we mine ice. And I think there's a lot of technologies, again, working in remote environments and extreme environments where we can actually, for instance, the big thing is to turn water ice from the moon into liquid water for consumption, but also for breaking it down into hydrogen and oxygen. Oxygen can be used to help the atmospheric conditions, the life support systems in the habitats, but hydrogen and oxygen are also rocket fuel. And so you could actually produce your fuel from the moon, which means you don't have to take it, which means the launch costs, etc. So there's lots of different things, if you put your mind to it, that what's being done in the energy industry, and also particularly the transition to the clean energy world. can be used, and it can go in both directions. And I think that's what I'll emphasize next if you move to the next slide. So again, two lists, but you can add your 3 dots or anything to the 3 dots. And what I like to talk about is how some of the things that we're doing in space technologies to keep astronauts alive, to keep a space station functional for 20 years, for example, the data that we're getting from satellites and the reason we put those satellites up. These are all technologies that are potentially specifically developed for space, but actually have applications on the ground. So satellite applications, I'm sure you're all familiar with. That's a big and a particular strength of Scotland right now. Autonomy and robotics we've already talked about, and we'll talk about sustainability in a second. Even though, you know, we in Houston we have a very large medical center, so we frequently talk about the medical side of things. But again, if you have a workforce on a remote location, the medical issues are very important. Medical and safety issues are really important. And so again, there's some lessons that can be learned from what we do in space. And I think we're going to hear about some of those, like I mentioned later. What we learn about in space and how we can apply it to the ground. But it also works in the other direction. There are advances being made in the ground in many different industries that NASA pays attention to, in the space community, particularly with the growth of commercial space, and pays attention to. I've listed a couple here, but again, you can think about your own list, and you can add your own kind of technologies. I did make a joke about we were trying to get deep fried Mars bars up into the space station, but I think the idea of using the word nutrition and a deep fried Mars bar in the same sentence didn't go down too well, just like the deep fried Mars bar. And Stacey, if you hit the button, the key point I want to make here is that this is not siloed. These technologies don't have to be, or this is specifically an energy technology that we're moving to space. These are being worked on commonly between technologists and researchers in both sectors and both regimes. And it's just making sure that we have the right conversations where you can move these around. NASA's doing some really interesting stuff in VR, particularly for training astronauts and so on. That could be translated into training your workforce for working on an offshore facility, for example, and vice versa. I was in Aberdeen a few years ago, and I visited Robert Gordon University and University of Aberdeen, which is absolutely fantastic. You know, I'm from Glasgow, maybe you can tell, but I never did get to visit the universities during my time growing up in Glasgow and being at the University of Glasgow. But some of the facilities they have there to support the energy industry is just astounding. And I think there's a lot of areas there that can be translated over. You know, I sat in the rig simulation at Robert Gordon. It was absolutely fantastic. Anyway, so there's lots of things we can do there. So if we go to the next slide, Stacey. And one of the key things I've been trying to promote and push, and this is sort of done at the kind of ground level, people to person level, and maybe even business to business. But I think we need to be thinking about this more as a kind of strategy for a country, a small country like Scotland, or for a city like Houston. We tend to focus on sector-based verticals. So we have the energy industry, we have the space industry. We're all used to digital, the digital world now. So digital, and you could put shipping, transportation, hospitality, all these different things. And we take these, we all work towards strategy and investment, and occasionally we'll talk to each other. Certainly the energy industry is talking to the digital world, space industry is talking to the digital world, and occasionally through events like this, energy and space talk together. Well, what I'd like to propose, and if we move to the next, just click the button, I think we need to start thinking generally and strategically towards technology-based verticals. And this is where I've identified 3, but again, you can put as many pillars on here as you like, where you actually focus on the technology. Then that's the socket, that's the wrench or the spanner. And then you add the socket, which is, look, we're doing imaging technology, so that can be applied to the medical industry, the energy industry, the space industry. And then you start working that way. And then the collaborations are a little bit more intuitive. The companies have a wider range of companies. They may have their favored sector, but by being aware at the top level, some of these companies can be kind of introduced, for instance, to a space company if they're an energy company, and vice versa. And so this is something that I know is happening with the innovation centres and so on around Scotland. It just needs, I think, a kind of stronger hearing, and we should all be speaking out to this effect, I believe. And I think this kind of event that Brett has put together in the last 3 days is part of that conversation and how we can move all of this forward. So anyway, so I just want, that's the thing I've been sort of pushing quite a lot. Most of you are sitting there saying, well, we do this all the time, which is great. We just need to talk about it more. If I can move to the next slide. So just to finish off a little bit, I want to talk about other connections that we have between Houston and Scotland that is not just about space, although it's got space in the title, but involves a lot of this technology conversation that I've just discussed, and that's the spaceport to spaceport connections. You've probably, if you watch the news, you've been hearing about, Sutherland got the support of the UK Space Agency, and Highlands and Islands Enterprises promoting the Sutherland site. Shetland's been in the news a lot for the Shetland Space Centre up there and some of the activities that are going there. We actually have an MOU between the Houston Spaceport at Ellington Field and Prestwick, which was in the early running, and now with the Ayrshire Growth deal, Prestwick is getting an investment of funds, and we're hoping in space as part of their growth plan for that region. But the point I want to make is that there is no such thing as a spaceport industry right now. We're working towards creating that. We created a thing called the Global Spaceport Alliance a few years ago. And we cannot, just to let you know, the word spaceport we're thinking about Shetland and Sutherland and Prestwick as launch facilities, but that's not all you need. And in Houston, we can't actually launch rockets. We have 7 million people in the city area, and you don't want to launch rockets in that kind of environment. So what we are doing is building on the strengths of Houston and taking advantage of the fact that we have the medical center, we have NASA, of course, the energy industry, we have a port, and we have certain technologies that we're developing, companies like Oceaneering and Trumbull that you're going to hear from. All of this kind of feeds into this ecosystem. They all have different customers, they all have different goals. But if we can bring those together, we can actually do this crossover thing that I've talked about, where we can talk with each other. Importantly, we can make connections internationally, and Scotland is for me anyway, it's a big driver. And some of the activities that are going on in Scotland, and you can see my little, sticking Aberdeen in there. Scotland is a small country. We talk to each other a lot, and being aware of what's going on in this kind of space community around the country. There's a lot of various activities going on in all of the cities in Scotland. Aberdeen can play a good role because of the strength of technology and innovation. And I think I remember seeing that Aberdeen was one of the prime startup cities in the UK. So there's a lot of things that could be added to the conversation that can come out of the work that the energy industry in particular is doing in Aberdeen, and then more broadly. So again, these are things that are happening between both the United States and Scotland and the UK in general, but particularly between Houston and Scotland, because we have a lot of affinity there. Primarily, I mean, I have an affinity because it's where I'm from, but the Houston affinity is through the energy industry. And I think that's where we have a lot of connections and a lot of friends, and just growing the conversation through events like today and some of these other conversations we'll have, I think is really important. And I think, Stacey, if I'm right, that's me done. Oh, no, that's right. One last thing I want to point out. Some of you may be familiar with pumps and pipes, but one of the ways that we are facilitating these conversations in Houston is through these discussions. And pumps and pipes, many of you know, Alan Lumsden is a Scotsman who heads up the Methodist Heart and Cardiovascular Centre here in the city. And he and a colleague from ExxonMobil set up pumps and pipes. And it's a way of discussing, they like to use a great phrase, which is using the other person's toolkit. So what can we learn from the energy industry or the medical industry for space? What can they learn from space, etc.? And we did try and set one up in Scotland a few years back. Didn't quite work. I'd like to see that revisited, and Alan, I think, would be really keen on that. I have nothing to do with this. I'm just a guest at the annual meeting, but Alan would be really keen to see more activity there. One thing we did create a few years ago with NASA in Houston is what we call the Technology Collaboration Center, and that's another way of bringing problems to problem solvers, whether it be a space engineer attacking an energy question or vice versa. And we have a number of events now, and one of the ones we're having, I think, coming up is on carbon capture, which I know is very important to to the discussions in Aberdeen. But we had one obviously online last November on imaging advances. And so we were talking about imaging technologies in the medical space and energy industry. And I just wanted to point out that just because of conversations we've been able to have, we had 2 Scottish companies represented at that workshop. And there are opportunities for some of your companies to, present at some of these these events. One I was really excited, well, the 2 that I'm listed here, I was really excited. I invited them because of what I'd seen they were doing. One is GDI out of Aberdeen, and they do basically 3D mapping of offshore facilities, and they create a digital map of the offshore facility, and then they can help with repair and maintenance planning and all sorts of really interesting stuff. Absolutely fantastic. And I think that's the kind of thing that could be translated over into space quite easily. And then Holoxica is out of Edinburgh, and they're allowing for holographic 3D holographic video conferencing. Without having to use goggles and so on. It's a screen that fits over your computer, and it allows you to have group 3D meetings where not everyone is having to wear. So fantastic technologies coming out of Scotland. I've only picked on a couple here, all of which are being developed for purposes other than space, but we have brought them into the space conversation. In Holoxica, there's another company which is doing Think Math coming out of Scotland that have now got connected to the Jet Propulsion Lab in California, NASA JPL. So again, lots and lots of rich conversations to be had around just the simple fact that we're all interested in technology and solving problems. And I think there's a huge amount of overlap between what's happening in energy and space. And so I really am very happy to see, Brett, that you created this opportunity for this discussion today. And hopefully we'll be able to talk more of the Q&A. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, David. And just to say that I went to one of Alan Lumsden's lectures in Houston, and the whole pumps and pipes thing is fascinating. And I also hope we can revisit the idea of maybe highlighting it a bit more in Aberdeen. So we'll maybe follow up on that one. It's a fantastic project. Josh, could I possibly, and back to you, Josh, reintroducing Josh now as the Senior Director of Aerospace at the Greater Houston Partnership, our Key Association partner today. And Josh, you've got a couple of speakers lined up for us, plus your own overview. So Josh, I'm going to hand over to you for the next section.
Thank you very much, Brett. I appreciate that. I'm going to be stepping back a little bit and giving you an overview of the Houston region and be able to drill down a little bit more into some of the aerospace aspects that Dr. Alexander just mentioned. I do have a lot of information. I like to keep it fast paced. So Stacy, whenever I say next, it's next. So we'll keep on moving down the slide. Really just a quick overview of the partnership. We're the World Trade Center Economic Development Council and Chamber since 1840 of the Greater Houston region, more than 1,000 members strong. Next, please. Next. The Houston region itself, if we were a country, we would be the 26th largest country in the world by GDP. So we would be right about the same as Austria. We have a $500 billion economy by GDP and 7 million population. Next, please. We're not only a big metro, we're also a fast metro. We're growing at about 18% over the last decade in population. Next, please. And we're also one of the most diverse metros in America, actually the most diverse major metro in the United States. 1 out of 4 people are foreign born in Houston, and there's more than 145 languages spoken throughout the region. Next, please. Lots of global access in Houston. You can fly to all continents, 37 countries. We're one of the few metros in the US, or really even globally, where every single continent is accessible from the Houston region. Next, please. We're a very global city. Right now, this says 90 consulates. We actually, at last count, have more than 96, or at least 96 consulates in the Houston region, and a lot of representation from Scotland as well. So we're very lucky in that way to be able to leverage our international strengths. We have something like 5,000 or better institutions and companies engaged in the global conversation and international business. Next, please. We're a very young metro. The average age is under 35, and there's more than 350,000 educated millennials within the Houston region. Next, please. And when we talk about the talent pipeline, universities, Rice University, Dr. Alexander's here representing Rice, more than 40 in the Houston region, and many of those have programs such as the only space architecture program in the world, certainly in the United States, with the University of Houston. There's more than 400,000 students enrolled, so you can imagine the pipeline for any venture in Houston is always being filled with new talent within the region, and that's one of our greatest strengths as well. Next, please. So we're very, like Scotland, a very freedom-loving, independent-minded area of the world. We're #1 in doing business by a lot of measures. We have no personal income tax, no corporate income tax. So we're an extremely good place to do business for the bottom line of your company. You won't find the combination in many other states of our workforce plus the tax structure. Next, please. And we're also very open, low regulation metro. We have no zoning laws, and we're getting lots of companies from California and from higher regulation states currently who are looking at Houston and moving to Houston. One of the latest was Hewlett Packard Enterprise, HPE, that relocated from California to Houston. So there's just a lot of growth happening in Texas, and that's particularly true in Houston because of our low regulation environment. Next, please. This is really interesting. The innovation corridor is something that we've created between downtown and our Houston Medical Center, the Texas Medical Center. The ION is really the center of that. The partnership was instrumental with the ION in creating an aerospace innovation hub this year with a $1.4 million grant, government grant that we secured. So there'll be a lot of good things happening with new institutions, collaborating with the partnership and others in the region. And we could certainly follow up on any questions with that. Next slide, please. We're really being recognized more and more as a gateway to innovation. And I think with the gateway theme between Aberdeen and Houston, it's worth mentioning some of these global top-level publications such as Forbes. Really we're out there in an international aspect more than Houston's ever been, and more recognized as being this gateway model that Brett and the Houston Aberdeen Gateway have promoted for such a long time. So this is just one example of our international connectivity. Next, please. Next. Just as an overview before I get into more of the aerospace focus, our industries that we focus in the partnership: energy, life science, manufacturing, trade and logistics, and we also attract those headquarters such as HPE that I just mentioned. Next. The partnership has developed a focus on 3 key industries that are really subsets from this list I just gave. Energy 2.0, you heard from my colleague Jose yesterday on some of the innovation happening around hydrogen, carbon capture, solar, wind. There's other aspects that we've seen as far as the synergy created in Houston between aerospace, life science, and energy. And I can go into more depth on any Q&A on this, but in Houston, we have this synergy like no other metro in the world with Johnson Space Center, our energy legacy and new energy emerging, greatly funded by those traditional energy companies going into Energy 2.0, and then life science being the human spaceflight capital of the world with Johnson Space Center. Next, please. Large energy companies, some familiar names here for Scotland, BP, Shell, many others growing in the region in solar, wind, digital tech. Next. And the Texas Medical Center has more than 120,000 people going there every day to work. So it's really a downtown and city unto itself. Just a couple miles south of downtown, you can see downtown Houston there in the distance. If you've never been to Houston, you would be amazed. You could find yourself in the Houston Medical or the Texas Medical Center and really feel like you're in downtown unless someone told you differently. So a lot of synergies happening within the Texas Medical Center and NASA and other aerospace and aviation aspects within the region. Next, please. This is a map that I created with the partnership showing our aerospace ecosystem. Before doing this, the conventional wisdom was we had about 250 aerospace, aviation, commercial space companies and institutions. What's clear now is we have more than 500, and that's the number that we promote globally and within the region. We have the names to back all that up, and you can see just a complete juggernaut of an ecosystem in aerospace, aviation, and commercial space. You see towards the Bay Area some more of the space systems in orange, real cluster by NASA, JSC, but also really spread out through the region as a whole. So lots of synergies to be had for any aerospace, aviation, commercial space company looking at Houston as any kind of a North American partner for your Scottish enterprise. Next, please. Just a little bit more detail. We can skip this one. Houston consistently ranks in the top 10 of many measures for aerospace employment. The workforce is always a key consideration in looking at where to land as a company or where to grow partnerships. That includes aerospace engineers, satellite and telecommunications, airfield operations, constantly just in the top 10 for many of these categories nationally. Next, please. Houston has 2 of the top 10 micro areas for aerospace engineering density. So 2 of the top 10 nationally can be found in the Houston region. They're down in League City, Fredwood area, and also kind of the Pasadena, LaPorte, Seabrook area, both in the south area of the Houston region. Next, please. NASA Johnson Space Center, really the anchor and legacy for so much that happens in space, aerospace in the Houston region. Tens of thousands of workers, visitors every single day, either at the Johnson Space Center or Space Center Houston. We would love to have any visitors who engage the partnership have a behind the scenes tour of NASA. Currently, they're on a COVID level 3, so really there's no visitors at the moment. We certainly were planning to have one with the U.S. Commercial Service this year, but as soon as that's possible, and you will be in Houston, let us know a little bit in advance, and we have a very close relationship with our NASA liaison in office and others, and can give you the non-tourist view, so to speak. Just say you were at the Aberdeen Houston Gateway, and that's all I need to know. Next, please. So NASA has JSC, just the Johnson Space Center, about a $4.6 billion budget every year. There are many technology transfer programs and collaborative programs with private industry in the U.S., and that can extend in some cases to preferred countries in the European Union and your typical Five Eyes countries, but that's more than 14,000 source patents happening out of NASA. So really a great springboard for a lot of private industry and commercial space operations. Next, please. The Houston Spaceport, Dr. Alexander likes to say that he was involved in the Houston Spaceport since day 2. And we do have a lot of activity now happening. You might have heard of Axiom Space growing at the Houston Spaceport. 1,000 jobs, $2 billion capital investment, first commercial space station on the globe. Really what sets the Houston Spaceport apart from so many others, it's in an urban center, 7 million people, a workforce of 3 million. It's not one of these spaceports that's sitting out there in the middle of nowhere. This is the model of the future when you need people to, the right talent to work at the spaceport, and you need the right people to take the first flights out of the spaceport to urban centers. They want to be in a dense area, just like any international airport. And Houston has 2 international airports and plus now this great Houston Spaceport. I don't expect there to be any vacancy at the spaceport in 5 years. So if you're looking at a place to grow at a spaceport in the US, certainly reach out and we can connect you with the team there. Next slide. Next slide. So the partnership is very internationally engaged. We hope to make it to Scotland in the near future. This is us at the Paris Air Show in 19, when we still could travel. Tim Copra, top right-hand corner, former International Space Station commander. Bottom left-hand corner, you have the spaceport. Diane, who you'll hear from very soon. Bottom left-hand corner, Dr. Alexander was there, along with Space Center Houston and others in the region. Next slide. Again, just more from the Paris Air Show. Top left-hand corner, you'll hear from Diane Gibbons with Trumbull and Mand here very shortly. Next slide. And, Dr. Alexander giving very specific talks with just the right industry out there, what technologies we need to return to the moon, Mars, and beyond. So we want to be more engaged with Scotland in Scotland. And this is just kind of a sense of what the partnership's capable of. When the time's right, we'll engage out there. Next slide, please. Next slide. And also, we were at the Dubai Air Show. You might have heard that the United Arab Emirates has dedicated more than $6 billion of funding to their space program. This was with Colonel Al Warden. He passed away just about a year ago and still holds the record for the most isolated human being to have ever lived. So he's still that record holder, is the person who was in the lunar orbiter when the astronauts were on the moon. He was the individual who was actually in the orbiter going around the moon, dark side of the moon. So the most isolated human being to have ever lived. Anyway, promoting Houston along with us and the UAE. So next slide. And this is just an example. We had the United Arab Emirates out to the spaceport. Beautiful green grass you can see behind. That's all going to be completely no vacancy in 5 years. We're getting tons of projects through the region. Next slide. And really, just to leave you with this, we can assist in many different ways at the partnership. If you're a Scottish company or any other venture is looking at Houston, real estate, site tours, custom research, we can give access to some of the right people. Permitting process definitely can help push that along, and introduction and explanation of the incentives that are in the Houston region. So with that, I'd like to let the rest of the program continue with Carl Walls and Diane Gibbons, and thank you very much. Houston.org/aerospace if you want to learn more. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Brett. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Josh. So we're going to crack on now. I'm delighted to introduce Carol, the Business Development Director of Oceaneering, based in Houston. So Carol, the floor is yours. We look forward to hearing your contribution.
And thank you very much, Brett. And it's a pleasure to be here today. If I could get the next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about oceaneering from sea to space. And, oceaneering is Space Systems is located in Houston. Of course, we're part of the Oceaneering International family, also based in Houston. If I could have the next slide. Oceaneering started out as a diving company in the 1960s, serving the offshore energy market. And as the offshore oil wells got deeper, Oceaneering pioneered their working class ROVs to support the energy industry at ocean depths. And in the 1980s, Oceaneering's president at the time, John Huff, wanted to translate the offshore energy service approach to space, and Oceaneering Space Systems was born. You could see on the right-hand side some of the equipment that Oceaneering supports. My colleague Tom Jones there is wearing a number of tools and hardware that Oceaneering has developed and now maintains. And the background that I have is Johnson Space Center's Neutral Buoyancy Lab, where our astronauts learn spacewalking underwater before they actually do those spacewalks at the International Space Station. If I could get the next slide. So as I mentioned, Oceaneering International has offices worldwide. Our corporate offices are here in Houston in the Energy Corridor. Space Systems is in Houston as well, but we're located in that southeast part of town adjacent to Johnson Space Center. As you can tell, we have our Aberdeen hub where we are proud of the work that our team performs there for our North Sea customers. Next slide. A little bit about Space Systems. We've been in the Houston area for more than 35 years, working to meet the growing needs of NASA and the expanding commercial and international space sectors. Our work is divided into three portfolios: vehicle and life support, automation and robotics, and the operations and services team. Next slide. A little bit about vehicle systems and life support. We provide solutions to protect humans and their equipment when they're operating in the space environment. On the left-hand side is the Orion capsule with the orange crew module uprighting system bags that we developed for Lockheed Martin and NASA. Those flotation bags will ensure that the capsule stays upright after it splashes down in the ocean after its space mission. And if you watch the Super Bowl, you might have seen the Orion and the crew module uprighting system featured in the Pringles ad. We also provide thermal protection systems for NASA's newest rocket, the Space Launch System, providing the thermal blankets to protect the bottom of the rocket from the heat of that rocket exhaust on the solid rocket motors. So we're very proud to be sort of following up with the work that we used to do on the shuttle, the exact same work on those solid rocket boosters. And we're also excited to be part of the Dynetics lunar lander team, providing spacesuit integration, crew equipment, and thermal protection solutions to Dynetics. Next slide, please. We wanted to talk a little bit about EVA. We have a long history of working on EVA or spacesuit technologies. We were the prime contractor for the Constellation spacesuit contract, and the spacesuit on the left was developed by our team and tested by Oceaneering engineers and NASA astronauts. The technologies that we developed are being incorporated into the spacesuit that NASA is now developing. And in the center picture, we developed the nitrox breathing gas system for NASA's neutral buoyancy lab that allows divers and astronauts to work safely underwater without fear of decompression when they surface. On the right-hand picture, we developed a liquid thermal garment to keep astronauts comfortable while working in the spacesuit or other combined suits. Next slide. So moving on to our second portfolio, EVA tools and equipment. We're NASA's leading design and development team for new EVA tools and equipment to include sustaining engineering and replenishment of all the ISS tools and equipment. Our history goes back to the first shuttle mission, and we developed tools for the first three Hubble repair missions. We also, in the center picture there, we also develop electronic systems to support EVA, such as the EVA Battery Operations Terminal, or EBOT. That is currently being installed on the space station, just got launched a couple of months ago, and the crews are upgrading their battery charging capabilities. And then we're also looking beyond human operations to support robotic satellite servicing. And we're a team member on DARPA's remote servicing of geostationary satellites. It's a mouthful, but we're very proud of that. We're providing the tool changer, which is a mechanical hand that goes on the robotic manipulator and that grips the servicing tools. So we're looking forward to seeing that mission fly sometime in the next couple of years. Next slide. So we're also very involved in robotics and automation. We develop robotic manipulators and robotic solutions. We were part of the Robonaut 2 team on NASA, and we've also provided integrated robotic systems for the pharmaceutical industry. That picture on right shows an automated system for performing X-ray measurements on protein crystals for the pharmaceutical industry. We did this for a company called Rigaku. Next slide. So going to our sort of third portfolio, operations and services, we're part of the team that manages elements of the neutral buoyancy lab for astronaut spacewalk training. So about half of the divers at the neutral buoyancy lab are oceaneering employees, as well as other key areas to make sure the spacewalking training is performed in a very safe manner. In addition to that, we also have an ROV and control station based there at the neutral buoyancy lab to provide development testing opportunities in a very controlled environment for our energy customers. Next slide. So our services also include manufacturing what we design, to include both soft goods, such as those thermal protection blankets around the solid rocket motors, as well as metallic parts in our state-of-the-art machine shop. We also perform installation services for specialized thermal protection systems for our customers. Next slide, please. And then all our products are built to meet or exceed customer quality requirements. And for NASA and Aerospace, those quality standards are very high. Our team is fully certified, provides full configuration management with safety, reliability, and maintainability analyses. And we were nominated a couple of times for the prestigious George M. Lowe Award for Quality, and we were selected as the award winner in 2008. And we're proud of that because we're a fairly small part of oceaneering, and so we had to compete with some of the big companies, and we're very pleased with the result. Next slide, please. And we are very proud to be part of NASA's past and excited to be part of NASA's present and future. And the picture we show here is the Artemis program, which targets a human landing for the first woman and next man on the lunar surface. Most recently, aiming for 2024. I think NASA is looking at a new schedule, but we are proud of our legacy of supporting NASA in the past and looking forward to the next chapter in space history. And thank you very much.
That was absolutely fantastic, Carol. That was packed with so much information and thought-provoking content. Just amazing. Thank you so much for that.
You're quite welcome.
I'd like to now move on to our next speaker, also a guest of Greater Houston Partnership today. Diane Gibbons is the CEO of Trumbull Unmanned, based in Texas. Diane, the floor is yours. Look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you, Brett, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. And I just appreciate the opportunity to share our story and share some ways we can potentially collaborate. Trumbull, we're Houston-based, and we're Forbes Top 25 Better Founded Startup. We serve energy and government and are focused on a drone-enabled ESG data provider. And I'll say it's an honor to follow oceaneering, which I think we could all agree we can perhaps more simply call engineering. And wanted to just, connect a few dots there. And so you can go to the next slide. So right now I'm at our office in Houston at Houston Spaceport. And, Josh showed pictures of us giving tours to other countries and delegates, and we would love to host any of you. So I wanted to share that, with Josh, with David. We would love to host any of you here. And across the runway at Ellington Field, where I am now, was Carl's background, the Neutral Buoyancy Lab. So there's a lot here at the spaceport. And again, we would love to have you in some way. And I'm a Texan. And since this is aerospace, it sort of applies to both, aerospace. There's a joke, how do you learn if someone's a Texan? They'll tell you. So it's the same thing with pilots, or you can insert a lot of other categories. And so I also wanted to share, my children are Scottish, Irish, and Spanish Mexican from my side. And so, would love to have more connections with you all in the future. And so, just briefly about the company, as you see here, we serve energy and government. We focus on digitization. We focus on virtual support and sustainability, ultimately to optimize equipment utilization within the energy side. We also leverage dual use technology to integrate and scale innovative, cost-effective, and tech-enabled solutions. Next. At our core, as a company, we aim to serve, solve problems, and add value. And we're sought after by government, energy, and commercial clients. And so I would say most relevant in my background is a focus on technical, environmental innovation and integration, as well as more focus on this call, aerospace, AI, and autonomy. And so combining my background with my team's background in engineering, aerospace, and strategy, we focus on technology development, integration, advancement, and clients' requests typically center around autonomy, robotics, data, and integration. Next. And so this slide, the next 2-3 slides are more on energy, and then we'll talk about aerospace as well. And so more on the energy side, but related to drones and aircraft, our clients have relayed that over 50% of their inspections aim to be robotic in the next 3 to 5 years. And we're hearing that number increase over time. So both within energy and defense, we've been integrating and scaling these types of initiatives and, again, realizing, order of magnitude time and money and savings. Next. And so in addition to, operational integrity, both on the energy and government side, thought leadership is a pillar of our success. And so from participating, in the upper left with CEOs from, GE, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Honeywell, Trumbull, I'm kidding, no one does that anymore. At the highest levels of government, we lead integrate technology, and we'll go into some of the government side on the aerospace. And so our goal is to be, trusted technologists using trusted technology. Next. And, here you'll see some service lines. And as we added those, across the value chain, we focus on the areas in light blue. And those have been more in the 12 to 18 months where we aim to, optimize equipment utilization, reduce risk, exposure, and cost. And, in aerospace, which we'll go into the next slide, we're supporting Air Force Special Operations. We're supporting the Air Force Academy in Colorado, where I went to school, and DOI, the Department of Interior, to use drones integrated with aircraft to help fight wildfires. So a lot of ways that we can use technology to improve environmental sustainability and use technology to keep humans out of harm's way. Next. The U.S. Air and Space Forces that you can see here asked me to help steer and lead 6 prime programs. And Space Prime was just announced in December of 2020, and talked with David about that a bit. We're really excited about the 6 courses of action focus areas that we're moving forward with. And so when you think about Prime, think of that as an accelerated innovation pathway to field dual use and emerging technology. And so Agility Prime, or flying cars, was the initial Prime that I started on, and then brought me to support these others. So if you look on the right side of the screen, you'll see the obviously a focus on aerospace. The other 5 primes are in the market research phase, where submissions are due April 8th. And so the future primes that you can see on your screen are energy and autonomous. The name Optimus Prime was taken. Vector, which is supersonic, hypersonic, digital or game. We've combined that digital engineering game, as well as microelectronics. And so, those market research responses will help refine and rank the prime concepts in order to select the next prime. I'm so happy to share more on that. That's something, if you can tell, I'm really passionate about. On the next slide, you'll see the Secretary of the Air Force, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, and the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, the most senior civilian officer and enlisted members of the U.S. Air Force. And so Josh mentioned the Paris Air Show with David, and you can't really see in the picture, but my mask is the Space Center Houston, NASA Space Center Houston JSC mask that I wore to highlight that. It's always a fun conversation starter. And we were looking forward to doing more things in Farnborough, but we're excited to do that in the next cycle. Next, please. And so, just of the next few images are, types of imagery that we collected. So we've, flown in the Atlantic and Pacific. We're doing more around the world. We flew up in Danish and Norwegian airspace around 82.5 degrees north latitude. And, that's the next picture you'll see. And so, we were flying to monitor ice pack movement and drop beacons to simulate if and how ice packs would hit a rig. And so, I love the applied research side of what we're doing. So again, advancing technology, and this was back in 2015. Next. And so we collect all types of data to make products like this. And on the next slide, you'll see, a 3D model of a plant and refinery here in the States. And so trying to keep this very quick, because I know we have a lot of talks. The next slide just shows a few areas where and how we're using unmanned systems and energy. We're unfortunately unable to show our DoD and government efforts, but happy to talk about those offline. And next, and just wanted to say, thank you for this opportunity. I had slides and backup, and those are on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And after hearing and David and talking about universities there, I do think that's an area that we can potentially collaborate in the future, is focusing on specific STEM categories within aerospace. Again, we can go to you and showcase ways that we can use technology to improve life, to reduce risk, and really and truly enable that next generation workforce. And so excited to continue this conversation, and thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Diane, and great content and delivered with passion, and lots of interesting things there that I've learned, certainly. Thank you for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. So that concludes our Greater Houston Partnership section of guests and speakers. However, on with the show. I'm delighted to introduce next George Abbey Jr. of Strategic Space Services. Now, I met George many years ago in Houston, and we've continued the dialogue. I'm sorry, George, it took me 9 years to get adding an Aerospace Day, but we're here. I'm delighted to have you on it. Just to set the scene, George's family, very synonymous with space in Houston. For those of you that don't know, George's father, George Abbey Sr., was the founder and the creator of the Johnson Space Center for President Kennedy and President Johnson, and is still active in the industry. And George Abbey Jr. is also very active in the trade between UK, Scotland, and Houston, Texas, and beyond. So, George, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Brett. I appreciate it. It has been a number of years, but I'm glad to be here and to share. I run an aerospace professional consultancy here in Houston, and I offer expert advice in particular areas such as all the things you can think of: business, education, law, the regulatory compliance, the marketing, finance, finding where to find funds, some of the human health and life science stuff where performance care is needed, engineering, science, and also security. Next. First, I'd like to discuss a strategic way to look at the overall space market here in Houston, Texas, the US, and international. Josh mentioned briefly the 5 Eyes. Typically, it's abbreviated as 50, but they are the intelligence alliance comprising Australia, Canada, New Zealand, United Kingdom, and the United States. This was born out of back after World War II. They signed an agreement, that is the UK and the US. And then over the years, pendencies and other annex and other ways of working in relationships added more partners, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. Next. While 50, if you want to call it that, 5 Eye activities have been secret for most of its history. The bloc was thrusted into this global spotlight back in 2013 through intelligence leaks. Some recognize there are a second and third level intelligence tiers, 9 eyes and 14 eyes. Other countries like Japan have said that they want to join the Five Eyes intelligence network as well. The 9 eyes add Denmark, France, Norway, and the Netherlands to the original 5, while the 14 eyes comprise of plus Germany, Belgium, Sweden, and Spain. Next. So we're more connected than we really want to admit. It comes from a 2015 film related to the Great Divide, which you could find in parts of Colorado, emphasizes the film, working and pioneering with one another. Oddly, the boundaries of Colorado were part of the Republic of Texas, because we claim borders of parts of New Mexico, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and as much as Wyoming. So amazingly, we are connected than we would like to admit. Next. Of course, 2020 has been a challenging year, not only because of the pandemic, but because of Brexit. News of the pandemic, economic collapse, other significant events, all these things, diversive election effects and aftermath. In essence, we have upended a lot of our business domestically and internationally. So all these events have created a great divide. Next. So I just sit back and say, so keep calm and think, I need to work smarter, not harder. Yes, pieces of the puzzles are hard put together, but they are ones to which to try to wield how that might impact your nation and your space sector. You're not alone, and Strategic Space Services is willing to help you work out those things most brilliantly. Here are a few pieces of the 5-eye puzzle. Next. UK Space Agency in Australia. Obviously, Australia is part of the 5 Eyes. So yes, that's part of that particular market. Next. You have also the UK Space Agency tying into NASA. And if you can look below very carefully, you'll see also JAXA and other different countries listed under the Artemis Accords. This is where there's a huge emphasis on how we return to the moon in 2024. Next. So 2 eyes are never enough. At best, you need 5 eyes peering into what Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom and US are doing. Some have gateways, some have space bridges and strategic agreements, etc. Next. In the US, space opportunities abound in different agencies and departments. Most of us have heard of NASA and the new Department of Defense Space Force. However, different agencies and government departments offer a wide range of space opportunities. Which one you choose? Again, you're not alone. My company, Strategic Space Services, is here to help you get you smarter, sorted out in all of this. Next. So you don't have to, if you don't have your boots here on the ground in the US, by all means, what I am offering is thoughts and ideas on international joint ventures. If done well, those ventures can dramatically shorten the timeline, in terms of your developing into a global market or a supplier base. And if correctly executed, these things can be not misadventures, but great adventures. Next. So know that Strategic Space Services is willing to craft international agreements and joint ventures, helping with startups, anything that would mutually be beneficial to one another. Next. Recently, we did a filing, DBA, doing business as, with Terra Nova Defense Solutions in the US. This company name is identical to the Terra Nova Defense Solutions, thus operating in Canada. Why do we do that? Is we know that we have to have a strategy for both of us in marketing the US. One of the things that's featured in what Terra Nova has done is through their partners is provided a unique way of quantum proofing encryption for keeping your data safe. Next. So I'm sure we recognize that there are many different spacefaring nations now. Unfortunately, my company, has been a participant in what is called the International Space Medicine Summit. The purpose of the International Space Medicine Summit is to bring together, leading physicians, space biomedicine science, and spacefaring nations, in high-level discussions in terms of how to work with space medicine research, ways to enhance international cooperation, and collaborate for further research. All of the International Space Station partners have been represented. In the past, China and India have been invited to participate. All of this particular activity is done here at the Baker Institute at Rice University, real close to where Dave Alexander works and lives. Next. So let's build our bridge, a gateway to span the future together. Next. Early on, I mentioned human health, life science, and performance care. Next. Yes, we're all dealing with the COVID pandemic, including the brand new variants that are coming out. That's why we're on this Zoom call, because some parts of the US and mainland Scotland, including the islands, are in lockdown. It's unfortunate. Both our nations still are doing face covering. We're cleaning our hands. We're staying apart from one another. We're isolating. Oddly, in Scotland, you can download and protect Scotland an app that will do tracing. So next, please. So of the 14 years that I've been involved in the International Space Medicine Summit, my company and I have forged some very close connections with many of the leading physicians and space biomedical scientists. Next. So SARS-CoV-2, it's a nasty virus. We all don't know how dormant viruses and their variants behave during spaceflight. And thankfully, NASA is investigating how dormant viruses behave during spaceflight to better prepare for, of course, space flight missions to go further into space, the moon, and Mars. Next. You can see here one of the Arctic projects that NASA has done. It's an analog. When there are times where you can't get into space, so often NASA Johnson Space Center will use analogs to replicate, the harsh environments of space. And so there was some work done to shed some light on isolation regarding the close nature of isolation for looking at responses to the COVID. Next. Here's a short video clip of what the folks are doing across the street from me related to human research program. So go ahead and play the video, please.
Spaceflight results in many negative health effects, and causes may include microgravity, radiation, or isolation and stress. And at the Johnson Space Center, we have laboratories dedicated to investigating each of these phenomena. I work in the immunology laboratory, which studies the human immune system and how it may change during spaceflight. The immune system is a variety of different cell types throughout the body. They fight infection and are also important for maintaining proper physiology. The immune system can be negatively affected by many of the factors associated with flight. Microgravity itself may directly inhibit immune cell function. Stress has a profound effect on the immune system, which is why we're more susceptible to illness when we're stressed out. And proper nutrition is important for maintaining a healthy immune system. We're very interested in how the immune system changes during spaceflight and determining if it increases crew health risks during exploration class missions. NASA's just completed a successful immune study on board ISS, which collected blood and saliva samples from astronauts and returned them to the ground for terrestrial analysis. The results indicate that in astronauts, there are interesting alterations in the immune system that persist for the duration of an ISS mission. This includes diminished capacity of these cells to respond, interruptions in sleep cycles, increases in stress hormone levels, and all of this results in the persistent reactivation of viruses. So this is not widespread illness among the crew, but interesting research findings that raise our concern for these deep space exploration class missions. For the future, we're designing the next generation of immune studies, which will complete the characterization of the immune system during spaceflight and allow us to proceed to the evaluation of countermeasures if they're necessary. Countermeasures may include nutritional supplementation or pharmacological intervention, or even things like radiation shielding or exercise will have benefits on the immune system. Studies of how spaceflight affects the immune system may provide benefits to Earth-based medicine. This includes information on how stress causes immune system changes in healthy adults, changes that may precede disease.
Thank you. Next. So I think my time's probably ran out. Nevertheless, thank you, Brett and Stacy, you all. And remember to let me know if you may have some great ideas on human health, life science, performance care to better for us all. And by the way, Strategic Space Services, my company, works in a lot of other space access, including hypersonics, propulsion areas too. Next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Some fascinating content and insight there. Lots to think about. And I know you're able to help Scottish, UK, European businesses explore opportunities and help them to market in many ways. And I think this has just reaffirmed to me that there's so much good content. We will absolutely have to do a follow-on to this, which is great. Okay, thanks, George. Okay, so now over to Glasgow from Houston and to Scotland. And it's always great. I always like in these events to showcase growth Scottish UK companies that are internationalizing and on a growth journey and have innovative technologies, products and services. And Insight absolutely has all of those. So I'd like to introduce both Gordon Bruce and Stephen Lardner from Insight Group. So Gordon, I think you're going first. The floor is yours to say a bit more about Insight and your products and services.
Okay, thank you, Brett. And it's a pleasure to be involved in such an event as you've put on today. I'll explain what we do as we go through the slides, but from a business point of view, I'd like to just play this video first, Stacey, and then catch up after this. No sound.
So the environment we live and breathe in needs to evolve. Introducing Room to Breathe, the natural evolution for all indoor environments. Room to Breathe can provide absolute protection against the dangers of viruses, toxins, pathogens, and microbes. We kill up to 99.99% of viruses and bacteria in the air and surfaces with our unrivaled decontamination process. Then we prevent with our unique BioTouch antimicrobial coating, providing a permanent protection to all surfaces. Then we protect with our bespoke air sanifier, which provides continuous protection for any indoor environment. Room to Breathe can also provide protection when you sleep with the Spry Pure hermetically sealed Pneuma Pure filtration pillow range, designed for a healthier, more comfortable sleep, no matter where you lay your head. Room to Breathe has been tested for safety and for effectiveness, with components approved by the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the Center for Disease Control. And whether you are a hotelier, work in the spa and wellness or education sector, operate in the travel industry, in a care home environment, or in the healthcare industry, we can provide you and your clients with that certified peace of mind and continuous protection for the air and surfaces. So although our future might not be clearer, it will certainly be healthier. Room to breathe, the natural evolution for all indoor environments.
Thank you, Stacey. Next slide. That's probably my mind going blank. Yep. No. Not quite. Slide.
Apologies, I'm trying, but it's moving.
I'll talk over the top of it just now anyway. So
okay. I'll mute and get.
yeah, so basically where we are just now is we're just about to launch Insight USA, based out of Indianapolis. So we do have a US presence during these interesting times. We launched late 2019, just before the pandemic. So we're not quite sure whether it was a good time to launch or a bad time, but certainly we've been working in this environment myself for 10 years, one of our colleagues, Dr. Pearson, for 25, and my colleagues over the last 3 years. And we actually have a Dr. Chris Loughran, a clinical advisor on board now as well, who actually had applied, for the astronaut program recently as well. So yeah, it's an expansion into the USA, where we're finding it actually a good bit easier to sell what we're doing. So why are we here? Probably the focus that's brought us to this is COVID. Next slide, please. We won't go into much. I think we all know about the transmission and the vectors, airborne. Next slide. Again, research we're finding in hospitals. We're working with NHS in Scotland as well, both doing the decontamination and providing our systems in the NHS. Next. EPA in America, there's not really an organisation in the UK that's similar to EPA, but they recognise that indoor air is up to 5 times worse than outdoor air. Yet we continually hear about outdoor air pollution, and there's not much recognition of indoor. Again, what we do, we've got 2 systems: Kill, Prevent, Protect, and Room to Breathe. Very similar systems, but any indoor environment. And even from this chat today, yeah, why not space program as well? Why don't we see some of our products there? Next slide. Again, in indoor air, it's full of different microbes, bacteria, VOCs, particulates. It's a whole toxic soup is what we deal with. The company was set up 3-4 years ago as a hypoallergenic experience. That's what we're going to provide to hotels and offices. But with 40% of the world having at least one allergy, we felt there was a business there. But now COVID has certainly focused that in people's minds. Next. So we start off the whole process with a unique proprietary product ourselves, which is called PB2012. It's safe. We actually use it as a hand sanitizer, and it's in hand gels. But that's our decontamination product or disinfectant. Again, safe on skin, but it's proven and accepted by the CDC to kill COVID, etc. Next. We then apply BioTouch, which is the foundation of all of our security systems.
Heather.
Oh, and it's again approved by CDC, EPA, and FDA approved. It bonds permanently.
You want cheddar?
Jerry, I can hear you. Jerry, thank you. So it bonds permanently to any surface, and this actually provides a mechanical kill. So it's non-poison, non-toxic, completely inert on surfaces and even textiles. Our Dr. Pearson had been involved with 20 years ago with decontamination suits, that type of thing as well. So it's got a very broad spectrum kill. Again, non-toxic. Your microbes, your bacteria, your MRSAs, etc., cannot develop a resistance to this type of kill. Slide, next slide. And again, this is a demonstration. It's like a bed of nails. There are other similar products with very low permanency on surfaces. Some 28 days, that type of thing. But ours has a covalent bond to the surface, and we've worked to get that permanency. So it reduces hospital-acquired infections. It's cost-effective, and the important part of this, it allows chemical-free cleaning. So you're only using water to clean rather than any sort of phenol-based or chemical-based, chlorine-based disinfectants. So yeah, next slide. I don't know if this video plays, I don't think it does, but this is a little video just showing the bio-touching in action. Does it play, Stacey? I don't think it does. I think it's just a PDF you got. So next slide. Yep, again, this is just an example of an untreated surface. The alternative products, which are leaching products to kill bacteria, viruses, etc. on surfaces and mould, and then a bonded antimicrobial like BioTouch at the bottom, where it only kills what it's intended to kill and not leach into other environments. Next. Image from Glasgow Caledonian University with BioTouch on the right-hand side, and this is a yeast infection, which is actually a bigger problem in hospitals over and above MRSA. And you can see on the right, it's just the debris left, which needs water and a microfiber cloth to clean away. So it's a continually active surface treatment. Next. Air sanifiers, this is where the NASA connection comes in. The original technology with the UV lamp and 5-metal catalyst was developed by the space program to allow fruit and veg to last longer on space shuttle. But it's been developed further and it removes bacteria, mold, yeast, viruses, VOCs, even benzene gas, any kind of carbon-based molecules, etc. It does reduce. And we've got some research from University of Western Scotland where we're even reducing carbon dioxide, but 30% in this study, and a microbial burden from the air and surfaces from high to low, and particulate matters of various sizes, up to 80%. So yeah, there's an extensive range for any indoor environment. Next slide. This video is actually a video, it won't play again, Stacey, but this shows the action inside the lamp with the UV and the 5-metal catalyst, which is just splitting water atoms. There's no chemicals as such emitted from the air sanifier, and there's no filters to change. So it's simply a lamp every year. So very easy, retro applied to hospitals, office spaces, and the space program, I think. Next slide. I'll pass over to Stephen if Stephen's there, just to explain. This is part of our Room to Breathe system, but also stands alone as another product that we're involved in. Stephen?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks, Gordon. So Spry Pure and Sleep Angel are two brands which are used globally. Spry in particular is the USA, using PNeumoPure nanofiltration. It's the only soft surface filtration available in the world right now, whereby every soft surface we deal with, whether it be bedding through to cruise ship loungers, for example, have hermetically sealed covers, and air can only exchange via the PNeumoPure integral barrier filter. We use airtight, safe weld seams. It's a heat weld effectively, so there's no sewn area. If you could just imagine a hotel mattress or duvet for a moment, or even a hotel pillow, and just imagine what's inside. Generally speaking, what we do is we keep everything, all the nasties, if you like, microorganisms, pathogens, virus, body fluids, from penetrating to the inner of the soft surface. It's entirely unique, with origins in the medical world, from premature babies, lying surfaces through to operating tables now, and used in about 45 countries at this stage. And it also forms the last part of the Room to Breathe system when we look at hotel rooms, for example, or cruise ships.
Thanks, Stephen. I mean, some of the companies that we work with our biosecurity systems are the likes of Merck Biosciences. We're working with care homes, and we're working with some elite sportsmen. A couple of, to bring it back home to Scotland, is the Stolten brothers. We're going to be working with them. But Stephen, we work with a couple of, we're working with some sports teams as well.
Yeah, well, the two kind of most high profile are Celtic Football Club in Glasgow. You also have Movistar Pro Cycling Team, the oldest pro cycling team in the world, who are supported with PNeumoPure filtration. Again, looking at infection prevention, particularly in the Tour de France, for example. And we're chatting just right now with AS Monaco in France.
Good. And one other, I can't mention any names just now, but it's a major cruise line that we're actually working with them with their isolation rooms. So where they need to provide isolation rooms, we're offering a system where they don't actually need to change anything. They don't need to create a clean room. They simply take the room that they have, and by applying our products to surfaces and textiles and then introducing Air Sanify, we're actually creating an isolation room for them. Next slide, Stacey. This is a case study carried out in England where using the system, we reduced absenteeism by 45%. Again, that's a whole wide range of viruses, gastrointestinal problems, but yeah, just, completely independent by the NHS. Next slide. I touched on this earlier. We reckon up to 40% of the world population has at least one allergy. So there's a massive issue out there with the type of indoor environments we're creating nowadays. Tighter, hotter, warmer, air-sealed environments. So that's where we've seen the opportunities. But this is really any indoor environment, from even transport, public transport to private transport, planes, trains, automobiles. Again, I'll drop in again. Why not the space program? But offices, schools, we could do a school from, we reckon, £1 a day, or what that be, $1.50 a day. So it's a massive step forward, and we're starting to see shoots of interest as we come out of the pandemic. We're hoping that people will realise there's other ways to handle infection prevention rather than infection control. Next slide. With two systems, as I said, we have Room to Breathe and we have Kill, Prevent, Protect. Again, we can provide certification depending on the model, or we can simply supply and fit, that type of idea. Next slide. Again, just we highlighted the cruise industry here because that's where we're seeing some major interest in Miami. We'll probably end up very quickly having a base in Miami with Insight USA to deal with the cruise industry. But yeah, we're open to moving, why not, to Houston and having something there as well. We'll hopefully have, through Insight USA, teams in every state. I think it's definitely the evolution of any indoor space, and combined with some of the, at least of the pillows and soft filtration products we have, and medical devices actually we have as well. We need to have a foot in every part of the world. So we're looking to expand through either franchise models or joint ventures across the globe. We've got interest from South America, Australia, and the Far East as well. So yeah, during these difficult times, we're a small company just now, but hopefully we'll be making a big step. Next slide. And that's us, I think. Stephen, unless you've got anything to add?
No, not at all. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gordon and Stephen, thank you both for finding the time to join us and to explain the US journey. And I'm pretty sure there is a lot of people on this call today and that have been on the sessions over the last few days that would be more than happy to assist you explore Houston and Texas as an opportunity. So staying on the Scottish side for speakers, it's my pleasure now to introduce a gentleman that I first met in Houston in the Petroleum Club in the days when it was on the 43rd floor of the Occidental building, the Exxon building, sorry, downtown. And I'm going to introduce Colin Black. Now, he's got a few titles, but I want to make sure I cover them all because Colin's got many things that he's involved with. So he's here today as the Managing Director of Pargent NRG, his consultancy firm, but he's also here as the UK partner for the UK Energy Technology Platform. Colin's also a global Scot, and he is also chairman of the NASA in Aberdeen efforts. And I think we've also shared a few Ubers in Houston, Colin, to lifts to and from trade shows and things. So I know you will have lots to add, so I'm not going to take any more time, Colin. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Brett. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss NASA in Aberdeen. So NASA and Aberdeen are a huge community, including NASA, Scottish Space School Foundation, sponsors, organisers, supporters and volunteers, connected with one common goal of inspiring the next generation of 21st century explorers in oil, gas, energy and space. So what is the background? How did this all begin? So a little bit of my background, 38 years oil and gas experience, deployed technology in over 50 countries and hundreds of locations, always with some great support from Scottish Development International, DIT, and Aberdeen Council, and a regular visitor to Houston and of course OTC. And due to that support from SDI, in particular Val Matthew, who's now with Greater Houston Partnership, and at the famous Monroe's Hilton postdoc pool parties, I'd met a number of astronauts. So as well as my day job, I'm also a volunteer and a helpaholic. As Brett said, I'm a Global Scot, 25 years, Energy Institute and SB School Career Guidance. I'm part of the SB's Global Energy for Me programme, working all over the world with schools in education, and I've collaborated with Aberdeen Science Centre on lesson plans. So the picture here we've got is the 2012 SB President Ganesh Thakur at the Aberdeen Science Centre, and we have embedded the Energy for Me in the Scottish curriculum. I'm also a STEM ambassador, and in 2015 I was made a board member of the Aberdeen Science Centre from 15 to 17. During my time, in fact it was during my induction to Aberdeen Science Centre, Tim Peake was due to go to the International Space Station, and I just happened to mention that I'd met astronauts, nothing else. And that led on to a conversation about whether I could introduce Aberdeen Science Centre and NASA. So I picked up the phone through a number of different contacts and arranged a meeting at Johnson Space Centre with Charles Lloyd, Associate Director of Strategic Communications Human Research Programme, and his Deputy Manager, Laura Abide, an aerospace engineer who also worked at NASA. Next slide, please. And excellent. And we only had three objectives: NASA and Aberdeen, NASA and Aberdeen Science Centre collaboration on education, NASA education resources available to the Science Centre, and potential images like the ones that you see at Houston and the airport there. Tick, tick, tick. Chuck and the team were very supportive. They loved what the Science Centre had done. Over 50,000 visitors every year, absolute huge success. So the collaboration, that was 15 minutes of a meeting somewhere I'd wanted to be all my life, and I'm sure many others would like to be. So Chuck turned around, he says, well, you've got a badge, it gives you access to the whole of NASA, Johnson Space Centre, so let's use it. And here we have the NASA director, put a camera over his shoulder, and off we went. And the pictures here show us the moon landing, mission control, the original, 2015 with the mission control center. Went to the mock-ups, went to the neutral buoyancy lab, and you can see there the huge part that Oceaneering play within that. And we were left with a thought of, you know, how could we inspire the next generation further? How could we bring NASA astronauts, scientists, and engineers to Aberdeen City and Shire? So I met with Hyan Lloyd, who's the president of the Scottish Space School Foundation, and we started hatching a plan. We also came back and with the Aberdeen Science Centre, we used the NASA Resources, which is a 21st Century Explorer programme, and that was a launch, and you can see the picture there. Next slide, please. So here we are today. As I mentioned, Aberdeen's a huge community programme, including NASA, Aberdeen, Scottish Space School Foundation, Society of Petroleum Engineers, Energy Institute Aberdeen, Highlands and Islands Branch, Society of Underwater Technology, Aberdeen Science Centre, TechFest and the Institute of Physics in Scotland. And it's also support by Apollo, BP, CNOC, Equinor, TACA and Oceaneering, and further support from the Robert Gordon's College, Mearns & Gill, my own company, Carjon Energy, and in 2017, 18 and 19, with great support from Charles Skeen and his team at Skeen House for providing accommodation. Next slide, please. So what have we achieved? In 2017, we had a visit by astronaut Rick Heeb, who flew in 3 space shuttle missions from 1991 to 94. And NASA planetary space scientist Sue Ledrer, whose research into orbital debris, which is a huge issue and a great discussion at the moment. And also, while she was here, they had also discovered the TRAPPIST-1 planetary system. They had a talk on Gravity, the movie, fact and fiction, and that set off the NASA Aberdeen program. In 2018, we had astronaut Bob Senker, who'd been payload specialist on the shuttle mission STS-61C, and former NASA robotics engineer Mason Marquis. And his team had actually been working on the Brent Delta decommissioning program, and Shell used NASA's technology on the Brent Delta. So we also were very fortunate. We had Nikki Lloyd, who was a NASA graduate, and during COVID, Nikki's actually been working on COVID vaccines within the NASA team. Their talk was on To Mars and Beyond, and very much involved the use of robotics in exploring Mars and beyond. We heard from him earlier, and a huge supporter of NASA in Aberdeen, astronaut Carl Walsh, 4 space flights, logged 231 days in space, and 2001 was part of the 4th crew to live in the International Space Station. As you heard today, Carl's now the Director of Business Development at Oceaneering Space Systems, and has supported us on many NASA and Aberdeen events. We were also joined by NASA engineer Heather Paul, who's part of the Orion Crew Service Module Health and Medical Authority. And you can see here in the picture here, our family day with Oceaneering, Jim McNabb of Oceaneering, and support by sponsors. And 2020, obviously with the COVID, we weren't able to do our in-person talks, but we had astronaut Bill MacArthur, who had multiple shuttle flights, and the commander of the Expedition 12 crew on the International Space Station, and engineer Heather Paul, who is the Orion Crew and Service Module Health and Medical Technical Authority. And they've managed to have some virtual talks. Bill did a Ask an Astronaut Q&A session with 85 pupils actually in the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, which is fantastic considering they speak Portuguese. So they had to learn English to ask the questions, they had to study science, absolutely brilliant. And Heather has been supporting us with some career talks supported by TechFest at Aberdeen Science Centre. Next slide, please. And just a little bit of fun in here. We were on a tour to, we gave the astronauts a day off. So we went to Castle Fraser. They actually opened the castle for us. And as we were going around the castle, Rick and Sue started giggling and laughing and said, "Is Charles Mackenzie Fraser any link to J. Alexander Fraser Mackenzie?" And I knew nothing about it. They asked about standing stones. And there you have it, the beginning of NASA and Aberdeen Outlander tour. So we go to the Aquarthe standing stones, Castle Fraser, and finish off with some hospitality, Glengarry. But of course, they don't get a full day off, as Carol knows. We also have them speaking at Afford Academy and Kentney Academy. And even in the 2018, the author of Outlander, Diana Gabaldon, did a video link and thanked the astronauts for their support and inspiring the next generation. Next slide, please. So as well as the week-long events with NASA and Aberdeen, we have a number of legacy events that continue, and they are organised by Stuart Farmer, who's the Education Manager for Institute of Physics, Elaine Holland, who's the Head of Operations at Aberdeen Science Centre, Sarah Chew, the Managing Director of TechFest. And they pulled together a number of different legacy events. We've had over 12,500 attendees at our events. Most Aberdeen City and Shire schools are involved. It's always a very inclusive, so we've got pupils from all different backgrounds. Everyone's very welcome, as well as schools and families, and media reach, as you see, of over 2 million. Next slide, please. And the digital, sorry, just go back one. Yeah, and just in 2021, the digital program continues. And now that we're online, we've actually got people attending from all over the world. And in the last one, we had people from UK, Ireland, Netherlands, Greece, Slovakia, and Canada. And next slide, please. And just to finish off, something that I always think about, and I think it's been a common theme, and David mentioned earlier about pumps and pipes, the links between oil, gas, space, and the medical side of things. But STEM and STEM careers have got 10 common themes as far as employability skills. And this is something that I'm always keen to support from the STEM Ambassador Programme. The next slide, please. And this slide here just starts looking at the links between the energy transition, the careers that we're going to have within the energy transition, the multiple sectors involved. And we're very lucky in the UK because we have the Visionary Oil and Gas Authority strategy, and Oil and Gas UK's Roadmap 25, which provides our vision for the energy transition to a net zero future. And that's going to include oil, gas, electrification, carbon capture, storage and reuse, hydrogen, geothermal, offshore wind, wave and solar, and of course, biogas. Next slide. And just to pull it back to the link between oil, gas, energy and space, when we look at the careers, we're going to have numerous new careers, Internet of Things anthropologist, AI business developer, a 3D material scientist, data brokers, avatar relationship managers. It's a whole new language it's going to have. One point there is to see just the size of NASA and how big that is. But we've also got a Scottish space industry. It's growing rapidly. Over 130 companies, 7,500 employees, over 140 million of revenue so far. And last slide. And just to close, whether you're in oil, gas, energy or space, we're all explorers, as astronaut Bob Senker said at the 2018 SB Offshore Achievements. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Colin, and fantastic update there on a fantastic programme, and the whole NASA and Aberdeen project. I think it's just so exciting, and there's, I guess, so many ways in which it can expand and grow with the many people that are here today. So thank you for updating us all on where it's at. Now, for our grand finale, we have something totally unique and very special. We are delighted that we're joined by David O'Neill from Falls of Clyde, with the support of Travis Middleton, one in Glasgow, one in Houston. And Falls of the Clyde is a unique project which is taking a 19th century sailing ship that was originally built in Glasgow from Hawaii back via Houston to Glasgow. So this encompasses energy transition, it encompasses energy, it encompasses aerospace, education, youth, tourism, hospitality, safe environments. This is the perfect conclusion for our program, and it is truly unique. So David, I'm going to hand over to you so you can share this wonderful project with us all.
Thank you, Brett. Stacey, I think you've got the video to play first, yeah?
I do, yeah.
Thank you.
The Falls of Clyde story is fascinating. A life truly remarkable. And we invite you to become part of her heritage as she returns to her place of birth, before once again setting sail on an incredible global journey and an extraordinary new life.
The Falls of Clyde is the sole survivor of 8 sister ships, each named after waterfalls of Scotland, and since her maiden voyage out of the Firth of Clyde in 1878, she's enjoyed an astonishing life.
The Friends of Falls of Clyde project is one of the most ambitious shiplifting operations ever attempted, fulfilling the vision of a 21st century, 100% emission-free tribute to the Clyde Bill legacy.
Currently berthed at Pier 7 of Honolulu Harbour, communities from Hawaii, Canada, the US and Scotland have come together to build and shape an incredible future, offering education at sea, fair trade cargo, sail trading and adventure holidays. Utilising clean emission-free energy, solar power, battery storage, and of course, the power of nature itself.
We invite you not just to follow the journey, but to be part of it and become a friend of the Falls of Clyde.
Learn all about the fascinating Falls of Clyde story and find out how you can help create and share at foci.scot.
So that video version ended a little bit sooner. There was a bit missing, I think. So the Falls of Clyde itself was launched at the Port Glasgow shipyard of Russell & Co. on the 12th of December, 1878. She was the first of 8 ships, all carrying the name of famous Scottish waterfalls, and made of wrought iron, of course, at that time. She is the only survivor of that group of ships. Currently in Honolulu, Hawaii, as the video said. She was once owned by the Matson Shipping Company, one of presently the Pacific's largest shipping companies. And of course, a connection here to the United States is Associated Oil Company. She's one of the world's only sail-powered oil tankers still afloat. Presently, she is a US National Historic Landmark and a US flagged vessel, a status that we would like to retain if possible. We at Falls of Clyde International will take this historic Clyde-built ship and rebuild her as a clean emission, educational, scientific and cargo vessel. She will fly the flag for climate change and transition in maritime shipping. And our effort to meet, she will be our effort to meet the global climate change crisis. We have 2 teams at present, one in the US based in Houston, made up of experienced personnel under the leadership of Travis Middleton. And we'll say hi to Travis later. Well, here in Scotland, we're based in Glasgow. We have a main team driving this forward for the last 4 years, and this is made up of volunteers and increasingly professional players from engineering, offshore and maritime logistics. This vision for the project was inspired by an Australian vessel called the James Craig. The James Craig, built on the River Tyne in 1877. She had a hard-working life, but like many vessels of this type, all that came to an end. She had reached the end of her working life, so eventually became a burnt-out hulk. She was then deliberately scuttled, but 40 years later, she was raised by a maritime history fan, Mr. Maury Flatman. That was in the late 1980s. We towed her back to Sydney, where she underwent a total rebuild, stripped right down to her iron ribs and her hull plating removed. Today, She sails around Australia and New Zealand, fully operational, meeting today's maritime standards. She is our proof of concept for what we're doing. I'm happy to say that Maury Flatman, who completed that mission, is now a member of our management team. A team is made up of experts in restoration of vessels of this type and age. We have also attracted the skill and experience of other specialists in rebuilding historic vessels, such as the Alyssa in Galveston, the Balclutha in San Francisco, Star of India in San Diego, and the Waver Tree in New York. We started in 2015 and have had many headaches and disappointments along the way, but we are once again, post-COVID, hoping to complete a lift operation to bring her home, starting in June this year. It is planned once again, post-restrictions, that the operation to return her, as I said, hopefully in June, subject to COVID, but there will be various stops en route planned across at least 5 US mainland cities, culminating hopefully, Halifax, Nova Scotia will be included there also, culminating hopefully on a Guinness World Record attempt for her welcome home on the River Clyde. We are scheduled to complete this journey home. We're hoping at the end of August, beginning of September, depends on how long, weather permissions, and how long we stay in each of the cities. But the project is much more about new technology as heritage, if not more so. Recently, we have launched a wider engineering and redesign competition, and this has already brought us proposals from leading industry propulsion providers from Europe, the UK, and the United States. But we are still inviting new proposals and solutions. We obviously need a propulsion system other than what we see as being the main power of what we call soft sails, the sails themselves. BAE Systems in Glasgow are offering support to review all of the proposals that we have received so far, including an offer from the offshore sector to help us with financing the propulsion and energy storage element. Others include ABB Marine, Wärtsilä, MIT Group, Bulldog Energy in the United States, and Seven Synergies in the US also. Glasgow University lecturer Anne Madsen is also working with BAE and a group of, I believe, 8 naval architects and propulsion drive specialists. They're having a look at the proposals that I've received because I don't understand what they are, and they will help us to decide which technology solution is the way forward for this project. But we are still looking for new innovations. We won't be looking for a propulsion system probably for about the next 2.5 years to 3 years by the time the rebuild takes place. So we've got time to look at other solutions such as hydrogen, green ammonia, but also auxiliary power such as high capacity solar and smaller wind turbines on board. A combination of all is being considered if they meet our needs. So the aim is to take this Clyde-built survivor, re-engineer her to go back to sea as a demonstrator platform for clean emission technologies to show the world the durability and innovation of Scottish engineering through clean emission solutions and energy storage systems. Operationally, it's planned that she could carry fair trade cargoes up to 1,000 tonnes, but that is not intended to compete with today's container vessels or anything like that. That's a very niche market that currently operates with a lot of smaller vessels, namely a company in Europe called Fair Transport. Now, we're working with them and we're hoping to have some partnerships where we can move cargoes such as tea, coffee, wine, rum, gin, and of course, whiskey. I need to talk to the distilleries. Yeah, they're a bit slow on that one. We also intend to offer education at sea based around an organisation called Class Afloat in Lunenburg. And one of our crews actually served with them, so we've got some good experience there. We're going to be offering a whole variety of other features, but one of the main environmental messages is collecting of ocean ghost netting in conjunction with the Extraction Action Alliance. And what we will do is they will put GPS tags on ghost netting in the Pacific or the Atlantic, and through the educational platform on board, we will take the ship to these locations, collect the nets, and then afterwards take them for recycling. And that would all be part of the educational program on board. Communities are at the heart of this project, though, through the ship rebuild, creating jobs, attracting new technologies to the Clyde, and offering opportunities during both the rebuild and beyond. We are looking beyond the Falls of Clyde at further 2 vessels that we've got in mind that if we succeed with the Falls of Clyde, there are another 2 historic vessels that we want to repeat the exercise on. Additionally, we seek to offer under license the propulsion and energy solutions that we're looking at as a retrofitting service here on the Clyde, creating new businesses, skilled jobs, and regenerating the Clyde as a centre of excellence for innovation and clean emission technologies. Finally, to a wider audience watching today, we're offering businesses the opportunity to join us, either in an engineering role or as new partners interested in what we're doing, either through the technologies or the heritage or the environmental work longer term. We're also offering commensal sponsorship plan for climate-focused businesses around the world to join in this amazing journey home to Scotland, which will be Honolulu, San Diego, Panama, Galveston, not Houston, Miami, New York, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and then culminating on the Clyde. Attracting an estimated global audience of around 750 million TV viewers alone. And we intend, as I said, to go for a Guinness World Record for the largest escort flotilla to meet the ship as she comes home. Once festivities have subsided, she will go into either dry dock, either in Govan or in Greenock. That is still up for discussion at the moment. But we're also in discussion with the Darwin 200 project. And we're looking at creating a joint venture through the Darwin 200 project and the Falls of Clyde long term into the future, where the Falls of Clyde will play the role of HMS Beagle from 200 years ago, taking young scientists and students around the world to the Galapagos and the South Polynesian Islands and such like, to be educated and learn in the same way that Darwin himself did all those years ago. For all Scottish and US businesses, it is a global branding and engineering opportunity to be connected with a unique project that's catching the imagination of environmentalists everywhere. Finally, we have applied for exhibition space at COP26, and we're advised by Scottish Enterprise that Team Scotland is behind us. So let's see if we can go score some goals there also. Travis, I'd like to just pass it to Travis to say hello. Travis has been a fantastic help to us in Houston with the team he's put together. Travis.
David, thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity to step in. David came to me about this time last year to provide bonding and insurance over in Hawaii. The longer I've talked to him about the story, the more enthusiastic I've gotten to make, and just have gone back to my team and said, can I go over here and work on this project? And luckily my staff and partners all said, please do so. Brett and Stacy have been wonderful about this, and it has gone extremely well. And my phone is ringing, so I'm going to mute me. Thank you.
All right, Brett, back to you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, David and Travis, for introducing a unique project. And I've got to admit, a bit of a soft spot for Glasgow. I have lived and worked there. Yes, I'm an Aberdonian. I have lived and worked in Glasgow. My father was a Glaswegian, born in Govan, as was his father, So the Clyde and Glasgow is very close to the Jackson heritage. So that is very good.
We will invite you to the welcome home party. And just a final message to Gordon Bruce. Is that the Falls of Clyde in the background? Yes, it is. See, there you go, folks. That's the real Falls of Clyde. Thank you.
And only about 3 miles from home.
Yeah, lucky you.
There you go. Okay. Well, thank you very much, David, for bringing us that unique project. And I do think it tapped into things that we've presented over all 3 days this week. So thanks for that. If you'd like to pop any questions you've got in the chat box, or if you'd like to raise your hand, and we'll see if we've got any questions.
I'm trying to have a quick read through. That was a mammoth slide share, so I wasn't able to keep an eye on the chat. So if there is questions, and if you've asked a question, feel free to unmute while I'm having a look to see if there is any.
Would anybody like to unmute and ask a question to any of our speakers?
I'm not seeing any questions, but I am seeing there's a lot of fabulous comments, and yeah, really good.
I'm going to ask a question then while you're having a look at that, Stacey. I'm going to ask David Alexander a question, and we were having an email exchange about the pumps and pipes, for example, which I always have been fascinated. And then David, you also mentioned to me, there's also a thing called rigs and rockets, which I was interested to read.
Yeah, well, I'm showing my bias here. It's actually rockets and rigs, but yeah, it's the same. Like
Apologies.
I said, you can change the no. You can change the two columns over. Out in West Texas, out in Brownsville, which is where SpaceX is setting up their spaceport. There's been a project that started it was called Gateway, and they've enhanced that to what do they call it? Emerging Frontiers. I think I just agreed to be on their advisory board. I can't remember or not. But they've been running just a couple of years. We focus on pumps and pipes on the three industries, medicine, space, and energy. They've chosen, and I think been quite successful, to focus on energy and space. And out of that rockets and rigs conversation has led to this Emerging Frontiers, where they actually provide, with the help of, I think it's the city and county government, funding for startups that want to translate technologies in one direction or the other. So I think I've talked to David Miller of TechX at the Oil and Gas Technology Centre up there in Aberdeen. They have a similar project, but it's mostly focused on the oil and gas industry. But some of the companies that he's working with and funding have technologies that would be of interest, I think, to the space industry. So I think this is something that Aberdeen, as they're transitioning or looking for diversifying, if you like, away from oil and gas in particular, or at least to extend their capabilities, there are opportunities like this that they could creating these kinds of events, pumps and pipes, the kind of technology collaboration center, and the rockets and rigs type thing, that would help bring some of these conversations to the fore, and they're all focused on technology. So I think there's these have proven to bring good people together with good ideas, and I think that's what we should be encouraging more of. And I think Aberdeen is quite well primed. Scotland as a whole, but Aberdeen in particular is quite well primed to have those conversations and move these things forward.
I just maybe another question. I was going to ask Gordon. Sorry, Stacey, on you go.
No, it's fine if you ask for a question, but Colin has his hand up as well, so I think he's got a question.
Sorry, on you go, Colin. Sorry, it's just seen it. Sorry.
Sorry, but just to complement what David had said earlier. So we tried through the SPE Society of Petroleum Engineers to create the Pumps and Pipes conference in Aberdeen, but it was a physical conference. And I'm looking at the speakers today and what we could pull together. I think, Brett, perhaps you sit in the middle of something in there. We could have an online Pumps and Pipes, because the timing couldn't be better as far as talk about energy transition, talking about sharing lessons learned. And as David said, the OGTC, we're at the forefront of technology. So it may be a conversation that we should take forward from today.
We once had a Pumps and Pipes speaker at the Houston Gateway about 4 years ago, and it was a speaker in the flesh. It was Dr. Andy Porter, who is at the University of Aberdeen, who I believe has done some work, David, with pumps and pipes, and he did. He's, as I say, a doctor in the microbiology side of at the Aberdeen Royal Infirmary. So I'm not sure though if he's still active in the program or not, David.
Yeah, I don't know him, but and maybe Colin can confirm this. I think one of the things that happened with the event that Alan tried to get going was I think the breadth of adding medicine, particularly in Aberdeen region, was proved a little bit problematic. I think a lot of the medical stuff is down in the Central Belt, and it was like, why would I come up for a space conference to Aberdeen? And I think maybe focusing on where the strength is, which is the energy industry, and expanding that to the space side of things. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, because again, Scotland is trying to, they're pushing the soup to nuts approach. design the satellites, build the satellites, launch the satellites, take the data from the satellites and apply them to all these other industries. And I think that's a great strategy. And I know the energy industry uses remote sensing data a lot, but one of the reasons we invited Diane on was because there's a lot of synergy between technologies that you develop for drones and what we need for space. And of course, the energy industry all use drones to different capabilities. So I mean, it's almost impossible not to find connections. It's just somehow just needing that impetus to get it going, I think, is what's required. And then I think the conversations take care of themselves after that.
I was going to ask a question. Gordon, Insight Group, Stephen or Gordon, whichever you want to answer this. And I know a lot of your products and services are currently on how we can, as you know, do things differently, operate safely, reopen safely, and reduce risk and return to a more normal. Now, Scotland's obviously just in the early stages of unlocking. However, obviously, I think, Andy, you would agree with me that Houston's far more open. It's probably at least 50%, if not more, open.
Oh yeah, it's totally open, yeah.
I mean, do you think, Gordon and Stephen, there's the fact that America's further down the line of reopening is an opportunity for you?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a bit of a rock and a hard place for us. You know, we think we've got products that can help you stay safer, even when you are open, but the world is shut down. Particularly in the UK and following legislation. So we're hoping once places open up and companies can see the future, that they'll start to take some of our systems or products.
I was just going to say, I think, I'm just checking if he's still on the call. Cornell, you're still on the call, aren't you, from SDI Houston? I think you maybe. I was just going to say, Gordon and
Alvaro is here from SDI Houston.
Oh, sorry. Hi, SDI are on the call. That Gordon and Stephen, I think I'd encourage you to connect with the SDI office in Houston, which I'm happy to facilitate, about your America setup that you're currently going through. Alvaro, maybe you want to say a few words on that.
Well, Alvaro has a question as well. So Alvaro, I'll let you say a few words and then maybe ask your question as well.
Great, perfect.
Well, happy to help whichever way I can. Send me your question, at least to start with your email and phone, and we'll connect. I work exclusively in the area of energy, meaning oil and gas and now transition. But there is a team that is involved in every other industry. So I'll forward that. I'll connect you with whoever is necessary.
I'm happy to do an email to you in Houston, and then you can steer it, whether it's Maureen or whether it's Cornell or whoever is the best person.
Yes, please do.
Perfect. Okay. And
Alvaro, question. Do you want to ask it, Alvaro, or shall I read out? You put it in the chat.
Yes, go for it.
Well, I think I can ask it better because I felt I've been watching these activities about space, and I'm so excited. This is all stuff that fascinates every young kid like me. And but I had a question because I was hearing, as we travel more and more into space, the emissions are kind of nasty. So I wanted to ask David Alexander, what is the proportion and what is some new technology upcoming that that we don't feel so bad about space travel?
Well, this is where, if I was honest, I say I don't know, but I'm going to give you an answer anyway because I'm a professor and I'm supposed to do that. But before I do that, I think, just on the SDI side, in the last year or so I'm a global Scot. I think I was the first space global Scot, but now there's more of us around the world. So there are opportunities there to get connected. And SDI in particular has done a great job in the last year at promoting Scottish space capabilities. And so there are people that you can have conversations with. I've introduced a number of companies from Scotland to different NASA centres and so on. There's a company out of Glasgow called Braided Communications who may be flying their technology on the space station in the near future, for example. But SDI has really stepped up, and the Global Scot Network, we did a webinar back in October, I believe, and we're doing another one. I think it's scheduled now for I want to say May 4. So there will be a space webinar coming out of this Global Scot program in May, where we're going to follow up on some of the conversations that we had before. So the economic arm of Scotland when it comes to space is really starting to ramp up, and I think it would be kind of good for some of you who are interested to start having those conversations. So on the question of Aero, so one of the things that's, there's a number of ways that the space industry, particularly rocket launching, because it's a growth industry. I mentioned spaceports. We have 12 commercially licensed spaceports in the United States. Houston was number 10. And there's a growing interest around the world, and of course, there's at least 5 sites in Scotland who are talking about it. And one of the ways that they get set up, of course, to impact. And so there's a facility around. They're worried in Shetland about the noise for migrating birds and all these things. These are important considerations to make. But what's happening in the technology side? So a couple of things. One is reusability, and that's becoming important. That's growing, and I think this is also beneficial to the kind of work that's done in Aberdeen, is what's called in-space servicing. And so there's a whole range of technologies for, I call it the 4 R's, reuse, I can never remember what they all are, but reuse, refuel, refurbish, and remove. And so there's all sorts of technologies that have to go into how you do that in space servicing. But the biggest thing that's happening is with the growth of this, particularly a lot of small rocket companies in that 200, 500 kilogram range for a payload, is hybrid fuels and non-toxic fuels. So there's a lot of work going in to minimizing, the amount of toxic material like hydrazine and stuff that goes into the rocket fuel. So the green fuel side of things for the space industry is really coming to the fore. And I think when you look at what Scotland's doing with their net zero economy and net zero businesses, there's ways to factor all of that into even just the development side of a spaceport. What kind of concrete you use, what can you get, all those different things. And so again, it's open to all these ideas, and it's just being aware of what ideas and what's out there, and bridging the different sectors. What's happening in making net zero offshore platforms, for example. What kind of technologies are being developed there? And the last comment I would make is that one of the things that people forget about, having a space station that's been up for 20 years, that's the most sustainable environment, or at least the most sustainable challenge you can have. It's isolated. You can't go to B&Q. You can't do all these different things, right? So water has to be reclaimed. Energy has to be used efficiently. You have to deal with the microbial environment pretty heavily because those filter. I'm sure some of Carol's skin cells are still somewhere up on the space station. So that these are all important areas, and it's just having these new technologies being able to filter, no pun intended, across the divide there.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. That's great. We've got time for a quick bit of mixing people up to meet each other. But before that, just a quick date for you to save. We have 5 gateways in total. I will stress that Houston is the original and the first, and will always be the biggest. But we're back on the 22nd and 23rd of June with the Guyana Gateway for a 4th year. And I think what I've found with Guyana is as much of interest to the Houston community as it is to the Aberdeen community with where it's at. It's that next frontier in oil and gas. Exxon obviously are down there doing lots of production. There's huge, there's about 21, 22 wells. And the what I was just going to say about that is, as well as the oil and gas and the energy side, there is also transition stuff which we'll highlight. There is solar, and there is wind, and there is hydro, and a lot of the oil and gas is then funding that. So we'll look at that as well. And all welcome. But I think, Stacey, we're going to come back from Guyana to Houston, and you're going to mix us up.